So, here's a question that's probably crossed your mind at some point. What's the whole point of suffering? Well, today we're going to dive into how one medieval mystic tried to answer that very question, almost 700 years ago. And trust me, for them, this was no abstract philosophical puzzle. It was a journey, a really personal, painful, and in the end, totally transformative one that all kicks off with one heck of a shocking vision.
And bam! This is where the whole journey kicks off, with this incredibly intense vision. I mean, this is not some gentle, cleaned-up picture of faith. It's raw, it's graphic, it's honestly pretty unsettling. And it's right here in this unflinching look at death that we find the starting point for this huge revelation about what pain is even for.
All right, so to really get started, we have to understand the foundation of this entire text. It all comes from a single, powerful moment, a direct and unflinching vision of suffering.
Okay, so it's super important to remember what we're actually looking at here. This is a real historical document. I mean, these revelations, they're like an amazing window into how people back in the Middle Ages were wrestling with faith, doubt, and just the brutal reality of pain. This isn't us looking back and guessing. It's a voice, speaking directly to us from centuries ago. Now, before we go any further, let's just make sure we're all on the same page with a key term you're going to hear a lot, the Passion. When this text talks about the Passion, it's talking specifically about this period of extreme suffering. Getting this is absolutely crucial to understanding everything that follows. What's fascinating is that the mystic's vision doesn't just show some generalized agony. No, it breaks the suffering down into 4 distinct physical torments, each one more awful than the last. Let's take a look at what they are.
The text breaks it down so meticulously. First, there's the intense dehydration, what it calls the drying of the flesh. Then, the constant loss of blood. Third, imagine the biting cold wind on an exposed, broken body. And finally, a deep internal bitterness that just eats away at you from the inside. The mystic sees all these pains working together, both outside and in, to create a level of suffering that's almost impossible to imagine.
And this right here is what makes the vision so unique. Out of all the horrific things happening, the mystic singles out the slow, agonizing process of dehydration, the drying up of the body's life force, as the absolute greatest and final pain. It's such a profound and totally unexpected insight. So after witnessing this unbelievable physical suffering, the focus of the text just suddenly shifts. It turns inward, away from the vision on the cross and toward the narrator's own internal emotional chaos. And just like that, it's a total spiritual roller coaster. One second, our narrator is filled with this incredible divine comfort and joy, and the next, bam, complete and utter desolation. They feel worn out, disgusted with themselves, totally abandoned. It's this experience of emotional whiplash that is just so human, right? So relatable.
But here's the crucial part, the revelation that comes right after this despair. The mystic learns that this feeling of being abandoned, it's not a punishment. It's not necessarily because they did something wrong. The text actually suggests that sometimes a person is left in this state for their own spiritual benefit.
To try and explain this, the text gives us this model of the soul having 2 different parts. You've got the outward part, which is our mortal physical self, the part that feels all the pain and despair. But then there's also an inward part, and this part, it says, stays in perfect peace, always connected with God, no matter what the outward part is going through.
This idea of a 2-part soul is the absolute key to everything. It leads right into the most transformative part of the whole text, where the mystic has to make a conscious choice about how to deal with their own pain. The text is so honest here. The mystic straight up admits that if they had known just how much this was going to hurt, they never would have asked for the experience in the first place. It's this moment of really profound, really human hesitation when faced with real suffering.
Which brings us to the big question, right? Why on earth would anyone, after feeling that kind of pain, actively choose to embrace it? And here's the answer. The mystic realizes that the peaceful spiritual inward part actually has the power to be the master of the suffering outward part. It's this understanding that our spiritual core can actually govern our physical experience. It lets us endure pain without being totally destroyed by despair.
Okay, so where is all of this going? What's the ultimate point of enduring all this suffering, of choosing this path? Well, the final part of the revelation makes it crystal clear.
The whole purpose of pain, at least according to this text, isn't to make us miserable. It's actually a path to empathy, to a kind of union. By going through our own suffering, we're given a way to connect with the suffering of another, in this case with Christ's passion. So in this view,
Pain actually becomes a bridge to the divine.
And here it is, the ultimate promise. The text is totally emphatic that all this suffering is just temporary. Through this lens of faith, all that pain will eventually be transformed into a joy that's bigger and more permanent than the suffering ever was.
And that's the final takeaway. A direct line is drawn. The deeper our shared suffering is in this life, the greater our glory will be in the next. It completely reframes pain. It's not some meaningless tragedy, but an investment in a future unimaginable joy.
And so this text, written almost 700 years ago, leaves us with a really profound and challenging question for our own lives. Could it be possible? Is it possible that the absolute hardest things we go through aren't actually dead ends, but are really pathways to something bigger, to a deeper meaning, and maybe even a greater joy?